Again, everyone, thank you for joining me for the last video of the year. Yes, I'm going to be taking some time off after this one, spending a few weeks sitting at home doing other things, not doing nothing. I've got things to do. You'll see some information on that coming quite soon. But I won't be making videos until sort of mid-January, and then I'll be back with some more. We've got 2 more issues of White Dwarf to look at to round out this year. Another year's worth of decades of classic Dwarf to look at. And my apologies if the video quality and or the sound quality of this one is not ideal. My own camera noticed that I had a very important project for it to do and decided to stop working, so this is one that I've borrowed. I'm a bit less familiar with it. It's not quite as good as my current camera, or my actual camera, which I'm hoping to get fixed at some point soon. So hopefully that'll be back and the quality will be back with the proper camera and the proper microphone for the next time. But at least this is giving me the ability to shoot something. So I just want to say thank you for joining me for this year's videos. I hope you're looking forward to a nice festive season, whatever you're doing. Thank you to those people who've already jumped on the memberships. So that is something that will be kicking off in the new year. So if you're interested, you can still do that. Apparently it only works on a browser, so if you're watching on a phone, you'll need to go and find a laptop or a desktop or something, and under the video there'll be a little button that says join, and you can click that and that'll give you access to the members stuff. Which, as I said, will be coming in the new year. So for the moment, let's wrap up 2024. That is where we are, 2024, with 2 more issues of White Dwarf. Okay, let's give this a go. So we will start with the least festive of the editions. This is White Dwarf 144, December 1996. Apologies if I have to keep stopping and adjusting the weird mirror array that I have set up in order to be able to see what I'm recording, because this camera that I've borrowed doesn't have an adjustable screen, so it is harder for me to tell what I'm actually pointing the camera at. I will try and stay on target as much as possible and keep an eye on the recording light. Anyway, we are in the Robin Jews era, of course, editorial here. We have got a growing number of Games Workshop stores across the country and a new one in the States. We have got some new rules for attack and defense scenarios in Space Marine. And this is particularly interesting for me because it features these template marker things, which I hope you can see here. They're a little bit dark maybe. These are very clearly, if we look at the photos later in this article, here we go, some photos here. If we look at this modelling article a bit later on making epic fortifications, the results of these fortifications that they made, which are in this photo here, this is what these are. These are photographs of those actual physical terrain pieces. And that's interesting for me because I'm just in the process of doing a very similar thing with my dungeon tiles. Here I've made 3-dimensional dungeon tiles and I'm photographing them. And those are going to be the printed dungeon tiles for the game that is coming up early next year. So keep an eye out for that. It's obviously the opposite way around normally doing things. Normally you'd get a piece of artwork and you would try and make that into 3 dimensions, but this case I'm doing 3-dimensional things, turning them into 2 dimensions, and this is what they've done here. As far as I'm aware, this is the only instance of this happening in White Dwarf. Maybe they... Ooh, sorry, that was my mirror array collapsing. Let's hook that up again. There we go. Maybe they couldn't get an artist for this issue, or maybe they were not particularly impressed with the print quality. I don't know, something like that. But in any case, it didn't happen again, as far as I am aware. we skipped ahead a little bit. You had a bit of a glimpse of these. So here we have got the some more Mike McVeigh high elves. Sorry, wood elves. What am I talking about? Well, are they? Yes, I guess they are wood elves, because they've got the cool wood elf horses and the banners, and is obviously associated with Mike McVeigh's wood elf army. But there is quite a crossover at this point, I guess, between high elves and wood elves. You've got similar sort of helmets and armor and things between them, and you could probably get away with painting up whatever you liked as wood elves or high elves, or indeed sea elves at this point. Here is that epic modelling workshop article, making trenches and bunkers and barbed wire and minefields and the like. This is an article actually by Robin Hughes and Mark Watts and Richard Halliwell. There's a bunker template using, of course, the classic slaughter base roof there. We have got some more epic here. We've got some big old Eldar tanks for epic, and some Imperial tunneling machines and drop pods. And of course the Leviathan, this great big headquarters unit command center thing, which I never really quite got the painting of. I guess they're going for the kind of heraldic scheme, so maybe having a big yellow thing, but to my mind this should be a sort of imperial grey bastion, but they obviously wanted something bright and vibrant for photography, so that's where they've gone with that. I love the kind of Prussian look of the double-headed Aquila on top of the hellboar there, and the termites here that are very much the moles from Thunderbirds, of course. Here we've got some Q&A, some particular clarifications for Space Hulk. In this case, we're looking a lot at line of sight with pitfalls. This, of course, was one of the things that came out in the expansions, this whole sort of multi-level gaming thing, which added a nice new dimension to setup, but brings up some questions as to line of sight and who can see and overwatch onto what squares. So that's addressed here. We have Rick Priestley's assessment of the noise marines, some background and some rules for using the the super glam rock space marines there. Really cool. I like noise marines. I like this era of noise marines anyway, where they're just sort of sonic blast it's an excuse, isn't it, to do glam rock and get as many animal print things as you can into the color scheme there. It's cool. The background never really appealed to me, but then it's often the case, isn't it, when they come up with a kind of weirdo freak model that's just someone's fun concept. Trying to put rules to it can be a little bit tricky. Here is Kent Martin and Christopher Alvord looking at Kent Martin's Dark Elf army. This is appropriate, I guess, from somebody who's coming from Baltimore, because of course the US is very much located where Nagaroth is in on the old world map. There you go, Nagaroth, very much across the north, maybe a little bit more Canada, I guess, than America, but we sort of associated the Dark Elves with being a kind of I don't know why they would be an American force. Maybe slightly, I don't know, maybe they've got a slightly Native American feel to them, but not really, not as much as some of the Wood Elf and Dark Angel stuff of this time did. But anyway, you don't often see a Dark Elf army. They're not super popular, but it's nice to see that, see one being produced in this issue. Here's a very cool Marauder miniature. You'll recognise this Pegasus, of course, with different wings. Got use for the High Elf Pegasus as well. Here's some more of these classic wood elves, of course, the war dancers that we saw painted in a previous issue. And here we've got the rules for war dancers by Andy Chambers, the various attack modes that they can go in. Rick Priestley's been making some more terrain, polystyrene hills, and some woods and hedges, and a discussion as to why you might go for different types of material for your gaming board. Here are an example of plywood, chipboard and polystyrene gaming surfaces, and their various advantages and disadvantages. Some more of Wayne England's Dwarf Army here. We've seen something similar, but not this unit previously, and now we've got the much more colourful Marauder Pike miniatures in play. It's interesting, I was having a chat with Matthew Street, who some of you will know as an excellent Warhammer player, painter of dwarves as well. And he was talking about how everyone associates Wayne England's dwarves as being blue and white halved, when in fact there was quite a range of colours in Wayne England's Dwarf Army as envisaged here, but the first couple of units that we looked at were very much those blue and white, and I guess that's what really stuck in people's minds. And that army, you can see on the whole on this back cover here, we've got there's that blue and white front row with slightly more colours behind, and interestingly some of these models, the banners and things have been moved around a bit. So obviously this double bannered unit here, this is not how this is arranged at the back, and maybe the double bannering in part was so that there could be options to split that unit into more units for gameplay a bit later on. You've got some very fun machines, these classic cannon crews, of course, that swapped around with the various different cannons. I remember having this guy, don't have many more unfortunately, this guy on a step ladder for the Dwarf siege gun, which was in production for a lot longer than the flame cannon and the small cannon and the bolt launcher pictured here. Here we have some more Titan stuff for Space Marine. Revisions of data cards, hit locations, that kind of thing. And then we're into the mail order pages. There's that Leviathan. And here's, I think pretty much this is full size here, I think. So goodness knows how much metal there was in one of these. Almost certainly the most significant non-Titan model available in Epic at the time, and probably even more metal in that than in one of these Phantom Titans, who knows. Some good old cyborgs, bionic boys, heavy weapons for the orcs, and there is that picture. I should turn this way. Sorry, because my screen doesn't flip, I'm confusing, and I think I was probably pointing that upside down the last time, trying and work out what's going on in the mirrors. Yes, here is that Wayne England's Dwarf Army against the Perry's Empire sculpts, with some Bretonnian allies hovering at the back there. There we go. So that was White Dwarf 144, December 1996. Let's dial ourselves back 5 years and have a look at December 1980. No, sorry, this is 1991, isn't it? We looked at 1996 last time. 1991. I'm so confused with the years and things at the moment. I need to have a good long break, which is what I'm going to have. So excellent. Looking forward to that. Yes, this is 1991. We're going back in time now to 1986. So here we go, where we do have a festive cover. Here we have an Ian Miller cover. I hope you can see that. It's a bit shinier than the previous issue. But yes, an Ian Miller, lovely festive Father Christmas cover there with this lovely Cthulhuoid Father Christmas. I feel like Games Workshop did the insanity clause, right, model. I feel like this was probably the inspiration for that, although I don't think that appears in this particular issue. We have another change of hands here. We have Paul Cockburn handing over to Mike Brunton as editor. Yes, I don't know quite why Paul didn't last that long as the editor. Maybe an interview with FilmDeg Miniatures will tell us. But yes, after just less than a year, he's handing over to a new White Dwarf editor, and I think the new editorial was a little bit stuck for content in this issue because it's a little bit sparse. We've got some open box reviews of some Marvel superheroes scenarios, the Fantasy Campaign Settlement Titan for the Fighting Fantasy roleplay system. You may be more familiar with the first one, Out of the Pit, but then this is building on the world, and by all accounts is a very good read. I really enjoy the Fighting Fantasy system. It's got that simplicity to it. There's very few rules, so it all becomes about the narrative and the storytelling and some improvisation, which I think is core to role playing. I'm not keen on much more complicated systems. We're also looking at the Immortal Storm for D&D. We looked at the review of the rules for immortal characters in the last edition, and in this edition they've released a campaign for using those immortals once you reach immortality, the peak of your adventuring career, and gain deityship almost. And of course, this wouldn't fit into that theme without this stepping across the various strange planes of the multiverse, as it's described here, to end up in New York. Yeah, that's right. This is D&D, immortal heroes fighting in New York. Interesting. I can't say that it really appeals to me, that idea, but I wouldn't rule it out until I tried it. Maybe it's a wonderful experience. I don't think Graham Davis really thought that it was a brilliant idea, judging by his review. Thrud the Barbarian here is attempting a new career, a new line in slapstick comedy, but predictably doesn't last very long, and Carl Critchlow is persuaded gently to go back to doing some regular barbarianing comic strips. We've got two new regiments of renown, Bugman's Dwarf Rangers and the Nightmare Legion. Excellent models, obviously, in Bugman's Dwarf Rangers. I rather heretically, I'm not a fan of the Nightmare Legion. The champions are great. The command squad, wonderful. The actual troopers, I've painted 4, maybe 5 of them for my units, and I found each one a real struggle. They're really very, apart from the skull and the armour, they're really lacking in any kind of detail information. My mirrors have fallen down again. I'm just going to stick them back in place. Yeah, really lacking in any kind of solid detail. That everything is very impressionistic, and although I like that sometimes, it's charming in a model when you're trying to paint something and you just can't make out what it's supposed to be, or it just doesn't look like what it's supposed to be. Then that's no fun. Cover them up, cover the bodies up with these great big shields. They look fine. The skulls are great. Oh, excuse me. The skull and the armor is good, but I'm not a fan of the unit. Here is an account of the various ancient technologies for communication that might be suitable in your role-playing games. We've got predictable everyday things like signals. Well, actually, the predictable everyday things are things like pony post, errand riders, messengers, that kind of thing as well. But we've got suggestions for signals. Yes, that's right. Terry Pratchett was not the first person to come up with the clack system as a system of semaphore towers. We have this in this issue of White Dwarf, and probably that's come from other places previously. I think in this case they're actually talking mostly about yes, they're talking about beacons, but they're talking about sort of Morse code flashing beacons rather than necessarily semaphore towers. But they do mention semaphore messages being passed on across the countryside. So there you go. It's possible that this is where Terry Pratchett got the idea from. We know that he took a lot of his early writings from the D&D campaigns that he was running, which is why the first 2 books read so much like sort of D&D parodies as opposed to the later social commentary that he wrote so well. Magic, of course, plays a role. Various different ways that magicians can be used to pass on messages. Divine messages, psionics, and whether it's actually a good thing or not if people know what's going on, whether the element of not being able to get a message is a good tool. Woo! This mirror array is not working. You wouldn't think that I worked in engineering, would you? Normally, the main issue that this isn't working is that I'm not doing it with gaffer tape, right? The masking tape that I have to hand is just not sufficient. There we go. That's better. I feel like that's going to hold until the tape goes out again. Right. Yes, whether it's actually, in their words, a blessing or a curse. Whether people can get a message across. If you can't communicate, it's a lot easier as a GM to spring surprises on people. But it can be interesting watching how players decide that they need to get a message to somebody quicker than they could possibly ride or take it themselves. Gobbledygook is back. He was missing for a couple of issues, but he's now back, and he's found a magic sword, which is not particularly pleased to have such a humble bearer, and makes its feelings known. We have a weird page of illuminations here. This is Will Rees, who did a lot of stuff for Rogue Trader, and also some Warhammer Fantasy roleplay bits and pieces. Wonderful illustrations. There's so much lovely pen work in here, and yet this is what we get. 2 pages with everything crammed in really tightly, really small. Not even most of some of these images. This could fill 4 or 5 pages very easily, big shots of these pieces of artwork, and they're all kind of crammed in. It's difficult to see what's going on. It's not a very good presentation of his work, which is quite a shame. And who these 2 people are in the corner down here, if you can see them, yeah, don't know. That's not explained at all by the article. So that's a bit of a waste. It's a bit of a shame. I mean, it looks nice as a laid out page, but as an example of his work, not brilliant. Here we have Shadow Magic, an AD&D adventure for an 8th to 9th level party by Carl Sargent. A trio of unholy characters stuck in a mine, trying to work out how they explain their failure to an abyssal master, when a bunch of players walk into the midst. Entertaining, yes, an entertaining premise. Yeah, definitely an entertaining premise. The players, of course, are set on this quest by a blue dragon here. There you go. Yeah, it definitely brings in some interesting aspects. It's almost, apart from the blue dragon giving them the quest, it's almost got a bit of a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay vibe to it, I think, in the sense that the players they're there under certain semi-false pretenses, and they encounter something which has absolutely nothing to do with them, but which they've got to somehow deal with and get out of without arising either the wrath of the demonic entities in the middle of the mine, or the blue dragon whose mission they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, it's got quite a nice feel to it. You can imagine the players getting very, very fraught and frustrated by that one. We've got this wonderful advert here for the Essex Fantasy Skeleton Horsemen. These are some of my favourite skeleton horses ever released. They've got that really gribbly look to them, loads of texture, loads of animation to them. It's just a shame that they are ridden by these Bob Ollie
skeletons. Obviously, all of it's Bob-Ollie, but the specific Bob-Ollie Iron Claw style skeletons with the giant heads that just look weird and don't fit with anything else. So you have to go entirely Bob-Ollie with it. So I'm really glad that you can now buy these horses from Essex without the riders, because that makes it a lot cheaper, and you don't have to have loads of leftovers or find somebody who really likes the big-headed skeletons to give them to. Excellent horses, still available, still pretty cheap. We have some Christmas silliness here by Marcus Rowland. Silliness, possibly. This is an exam on role-playing games, and actually, I mean, it's obviously written very deadpan as an exam paper, but I feel like even the questions, a lot of thought has gone into some of these questions, and they are exceptionally technical, exceptionally challenging. I would not like to sit this paper. I don't feel like it's very fun as a festive Christmas treat. You're going to get everyone around and set them an exam paper that is really quite testing. There are practical sections. There are things like, describing how you would set about creating an adventure based around something or other, and then there's kind of general knowledge sections to it. But maybe George and Elsa in their podcast would like to pick this one up. I'll send it their way, and they can see what they think of it. This is just a subscription pull out. I was just looking to see what that was. It's a subscription pull out in the middle of the magazine. We have some more ideas for Seaborn Adventures. I feel like we've had a lot. We've had Gary Chalk's ships for tabletop war games. We've had the whole series, I think it was last year actually, so more than 12 months ago, 18 months ago possibly, on underwater adventures. And we've had, of course, all of the Warhammer Quest on the waves stuff in 10 years' time, according to this magazine. But here we have some more ideas for the kind of dangers that you might find on the sea, from smugglers and pirates to kraken and waterfalls and diseases and sea battles and all kinds of things, along with the reasons why you might risk those perils in order to get something out of it. This is interesting, obviously. Games Workshop Baltimore getting a mention when we have a new store in 5 years' time. There you go. I just think it's interesting when you find these pieces that there's a kind of connection 5 or 10 years apart. Maybe it's not any kind of connection at all, but it's interesting, isn't it? Here we have Colin Dixon, the late lamented Colin Dixon, looking at some of his dioramas, and these are not the best pictures of these dioramas, but most of these, if not all of these, are reproduced in full in the Citadel Journal. I think the one that will be coming up next, so the 1987 Citadel Journal produces all of these in big A4, so you can have a look at them. But from these little snippets here, it's very difficult to kind of see how they would fit together. But nice to see stuff in kind of close-up detail, and to have Colin talk through some of his ideas for how he goes about composing a diorama, even though a lot of these are more sort of basic tips for doing that, rather than sort of an account of how he goes about things. That classic Night Horrors range, the White and the Wraith here, some unsurpassed models in that range, and the Fighters range here, which includes such wonders as Furioso there, Axel Starsong, Airhard. These models that I'm going to be painting very shortly as part of the Combat Cards Fighters deck. A lot of these models made it into there. And some Minotaurs, some wonderful, some not so wonderful. There are some great figures here. Before Minotaurs got huge, these were quite small. These were the ones that were on 25mm bases still. And then this guy with a ridiculously small head. He's kind of a Thrud Minotaur, isn't he? Not so great, but there are some great Minotaurs in that range. And of course the the mighty Minotaur Lord there, who's significantly bigger than the others. And then we have a Paranoia article, which of course is in different orientation, and not only is it in different orientation, it's also written backwards. It's actually only the headings, fortunately, that are written backwards. Everything else is written forwards, so we can still read it. But I mean, they don't make life easy for people running games of Paranoia, do they? In this case, we've got a couple of would-be troubleshooters who are sent on a training exercise, their kind of graduation training exercise, only to discover that things are a lot more difficult and dangerous and lethal than they perhaps anticipated. And spoiler alert, some character with a particularly dire 1980s pun name has decided to swap out all of their false ammunition for live rounds, and therefore make it a particularly gruesome actual adventure. This is a piece of fiction. It's very odd. Mostly this whole thing, you go through, there's some very odd choices, like odd naming choices and odd narrative choices, and you think, why have they made those choices? And then right at the end, you've got this one punchline tagline, and they've just shoehorned name choices and narrative choices in just for that one line. They've written the whole thing for that one line, and it's not even a particularly good line. Oh dear, oh dear. Games Workshop fiction at its best, obviously. Then we're back into the adverts at the end here. Fracas, The Reader's Revenge, the poll results. Best cover obviously went to John Blanche's Amazonia Gothique, the Kinky Chaos set cover, quite rightly too. It is a most excellent cover, and there's a small review advert launch for Heroes for War Games here. Another eclectic and weird book, a book of kind of a little bit of everything thrown in, but with some of the best photos of war games miniatures that were available at this time of the advent of colour photography of miniatures in magazines. Here we go, and we reach the end of that issue. So there we have our festive issue, Christmas 1986.